Welcome to Hollywood Stuntmakers.
Today on Hollywood Stuntmakers, we'll explore the world of martial arts movies, and we'll find out from some of the stars what it takes to make the action look so real. Plus, we'll take a look at some of the best boxing scenes ever filmed, and get an insider's look at how they were made.
You gotta come up from A to B.
We'll also meet some of the superstars that made these films box office champs.
Hollywood has never been bashful about borrowing from other cultures. There's a special kind of film that requires physical strength, a sense of grace, and incredible coordination. It became known as the Eastern Western. The tough guys are martial art champions. Gunplay is replaced by high kicks and exotic weaponry.
Kung Fu Mission is a good example of a popular martial arts film. In typical fashion, the plot line is secondary to the action. Audiences clearly watch these films for the carefully choreographed fight scenes.
Let's meet Brandon Lee. He's carrying on the tradition of his legendary father, Bruce Lee, on the set of Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Action. Against the wall. Now.
Here's Brandon with an insider's look at a rehearsal.
The martial art genre is special to me because it's always been more interesting, in my opinion, to watch two men who are possessed of skills in the martial arts fight with each other than to watch people shoot at each other. Because, as my father said in Enter the Dragon, any damn fool can pull a trigger. For me, the most exciting thing in working in a martial arts movie is the choreography itself, you know? It's really wonderfully fun and creative to be able to choreograph a fight scene, you know? On this film, Showdown in Little Tokyo, the choreographer is a man named Pat Johnson, who's wonderful. It's been great to work with him. And on the next film, I expect to have a little more of it on my own shoulders. And I'm looking forward to that very much. It's wonderful, you know, you sit home and you think it out, and after all the training you've had in martial arts academies, you've come to realize those certain golden moments that happen in a fight when it's just perfect, you know, when it's just perfect and the guy steps right into it and there's nothing like it in the world. And so you can create those. You can make it happen that way every time, and it's great. Well, Return of the Dragon was really interesting in that my father wrote it, directed it, and starred in it. It was Chuck's first acting role, I believe. And the fight scene in the end of that between Chuck and my father is the finest one-on-one fight scene I've ever seen put on film. There are so many nice little things in that film that show that it's a fight scene between two fighters. You know what I mean? Little things, I mean real little things, little feints, little things like that. I was 8.5 when my father died, and he was 32. We lived in Hong Kong at the time. So upon my father's death, we moved to America, my mother, my sister, and I, and it was just a real different thing, a whole different school system, different cultural standards. I mean, everything was different, you know. And we went from living in a large house where I remember every day when we'd go to school, they would open the gates and have to push people out of the way for us to, you know, get the car out to be able to get to the school. We went from that to living in relative obscurity in America, which was a blessing. It really was great, you know, and have my mother to thank for that. But so a lot of things changed. I just believe that my father would want the achievements of his life, which were great, which are lasting to this day, 18 years after his death, you know. He would want them to be of a help to me. So I'm very grateful for that. I know that he would not want me to attempt to become a pale carbon copy of himself. I believe that. And besides which, I have no desire to, and I couldn't anyway. You know, I'm another person, and hopefully I'll have my own book to write.
And now you're going to have a close-up look at one of the most important but least known elements of movie making. Sound effects editing.
Making a film is a collaborative effort between a lot of different teams working independently of each other. They're all working on the same film, but we're all specialists and we do specific tasks. My task is I'm a sound designer and a sound editor, and I cut the sound effects that are added to the picture later on. Typically, when I get the picture, there's a lot less sound there than most people would anticipate. There's the sound that was recorded with the picture. In a fight film like this, one of the things that's missing is all of the sounds of people hitting each other, because people aren't really hitting each other. If this were a car chase, more than likely there would only be bits and pieces of the actual sound of the car chase. If we were blowing up a building, typically the sound that would come in would not really sound like a building is supposed to sound being blown up. So my job is to step in and make it actually sound like it looks. Best way to illustrate it is in this little flurry in the fight. I'll play for you just those sounds as we're shot with the picture. So my job then is to look at that picture and figure out the structure of the fight and make sounds that are appropriate for that fight. So now I'll play back that same section, and I'll play it without the production, but with just those sound effects isolated by themselves that have been cut. Something that's very important in the dynamics of the actual fight sounds is that one of the pitfalls is that you can't make every hit be the biggest hit that ever walked the face of the planet, because then what happens is it all sounds very much the same. So every hit, every punch, every kick is examined one at a time. The film is taken apart and dissected, and a sound that is exciting yet appropriate for not only that individual hit, but for the overall dynamics of the fight. It's as if to say if there's a flurry of 7 or 8 hits, and the last hit is considered what we call a dispatching hit. That's the hit that's got enough energy to finally knock the guy down. It's really that dispatching hit that everything is aiming towards. This is a pretty vicious sound. Sound like that is used almost exclusively when it's a kick to the head. The gooiness in some of these sounds simply has to do with what euphemistically is called gore in the sounds of films like this, where you really need to add the quality of bone breaking and blood vessels popping and things like that to get that intensity. Now the same thing will play with the production and with those sound effects added. Now, of course, what would be added to that then would be Foley, which is all of the small sounds of the movement, all of the footfall on the mat, all of the whooshing of the arms.
Sorry.
Okay, Robin and Sarah, we're going to record the body falls for this scene next.
All right, Dean. All right, Dean. Let's do it.
Okay.
Foley is creation of sound effects live on stage in sync with the picture. Years ago, Foley was simply a way to record footsteps in sync with the picture. It was something that they didn't really want to do, but it made the overall sound job easier, so they built these stages, and they did it with the least amount of expertise and the least amount of money. Now, Foley has become two things. It's become a way to bring life to a scene, and it's also become a way to ease the editor's burden in terms of the hard effects that he has to cut. Okay, that was great.
Foley and I work together as a team. You know, in the case of the fights, I've taken care of all of the actual impacts, all of the actual skin hitting skin, but the sounds of the cloth movement, the sounds of the feet on the mats, the sounds of the arm or you know, the leg whipping through the air, the whooshes behind it, those we've decided in this particular film to leave to Foley.
I think a good Foley artist needs a sense of rhythm and
sense of creativity. You have to think of, you know, you have to think of what'll work for sounds. Sometimes the real thing, it doesn't necessarily sound right.
And you have to think on your feet. No
Right.
pun intended. But you do. And most
I think
of
a
all,
sense of humor helps too. You're trapped in this room all day, so.
And this is like a marriage, so you got to love your partner.
We rented mats for the show, the professional real karate mats. But when we got them and they sounded dreadful. They got too much residual noise, and it actually didn't sound good at all. So we had to come up with something that would, even though it's not correct, it doesn't look
Visually,
right.
it's not right.
But it sounded
Sonically.
better. You don't want it to get in the way and make it a problem.
It takes an incredible amount of focus because the red light goes on and you have to be there like this, you know, so it really is split-second timing.
You have to be in sync, and you also have to, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's character. I mean, if somebody's angry, they walk differently.
There are good Foley artists and there are bad Foley artists. And if Foley artists are bad, there isn't anything I can do with these knobs to make it sound right. And therefore it becomes extremely important to get good people out there. Robin and Sarah are among the best. Okay, good.
This room looks like my grandmother's attic because we need 1 million props to do, literally everything is redone. Each prop is redone, so we go to junkyards and
we have all these different surfaces if you're walking on cement, or if you need dirt, or if you need wood, gravel pit,
water,
or brick, linoleum. You have to have all the different surfaces so that you can go from outside, walk along the grass, onto the street, into a wooden house, up the stairs. So you have all these different surfaces.
I'll play the scene now. This is 13 channels of Foley playing.
Later on the dubbing stage, when they put this stuff together, they can pick the sounds that best flatter the dialogue, the production, the music, the Foley, all of the other elements that are coming together at that point. What may result may be a composite of literally hundreds of tracks of sound.
Now let's check out martial arts expert Billy Blanks.
A 7-time world champion, Billy Blanks has made martial arts a lifelong study. He's now applying this discipline to films.
Well, the role that I had in Blood Fist was a character that was in the Vietnam War and had a chance to go compete in the World Championships, and I did, and I went in there and fought.
In Blood Fist, Billy had an opportunity to choreograph his own fight scenes. Working out the strategy for a scene like this can take weeks to make it seem real.
I lost, but hey, that's the movies. I think you choreograph a martial arts fight by the angles of the camera and knowing what techniques are executed to the camera that make the technique look better. When I first started working on films, I thought that I could go out and throw a kick like I would throw a kick in a fight, but it's totally different. You learn how to throw a kick wider, like cowboy punches and like cowboy kicks. It's not basically a traditional straight karate kick. So everything had to be a little more wider and overemphasized. I think the most important thing that martial arts can teach a person, period, is discipline and focus. I think that's the key. Studying as an actor and studying as a martial artist is basically about the same. I think it's just goals. You gotta set yourself a certain goal. And if you set that goal, you gotta try to reach it, Coming to the gym, training every day, you have to go to acting class and train every day to be a good actor. I go to acting class myself, and if everything still goes the way it is, I'm gonna become an action star, and the way it's going right now, it looks like it's on the up and up. Hope it keeps going like that.
We look forward to seeing more action from Billy Blanks in many films to come. Here's one of today's busiest action directors, Marc Dessall. In the film Death Warrant, Dessall worked with martial artist Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like the heroes of most films of this genre, Van Damme is out for vengeful justice, and the villains who try to stop him find themselves in harm's way.
Geez, I'm a fan myself of martial art fans. I was in love with Bruce Lee. He was my favorite. And I think people like them because it's like a ballet sometimes, watching fights with professionals doing their thing. It's really interesting to watch. It's exciting. Everybody likes a good fight if it's done well. Rather than the old Western movies where, it was more of a joke. But to make them look realistic, I think is very interesting for a lot of people. The biggest thing about making a fight look realistic is not so much throwing the punch, it's taking the hit. It's reacting to the hit that makes the fight work. And that takes timing. And that's not something that you could just pick up. Even though you can be a great fighter or a good martial artist, to be able to receive the hit is what sells the hit. And you have to have that timing just down. So it takes time to learn that. In order to make the fights look very realistic, you have to rehearse again and again so that some contact is made and yet it doesn't hurt you. So that the camera angles are picking up the hits. So between the choreography and the cameramen and the angles and the individual fighters themselves, it has to be timed very carefully and rehearsed.
Critics have called it one of the greatest films of the 80s, Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull, the searing portrait of boxer Jake LaMotta. Boxing films have been around since movies began to talk, from The Champ in the 1930s to Raging Bull and the Rocky saga. Body and Soul, starring John Garfield. In these scenes, the fighters really seem to be making contact. This exceptional film is a gritty expose of the corruption in the fight game. John Garfield's determination not to follow through on a fixed fight is reflected by the intensity in his eyes. notice the realistic application of fight makeup.
The guy's crazy. He's crazy. I'm gonna kill him. Take a dive and finish him. I'm gonna kill him. I'll kill him.
The Great White Hope, adapted for the screen after a sensational run on Broadway. Here, the boxing took a back seat to the story, which offered a shocking look into the real-life story of boxer Jack Johnson. The brilliant performance by a young actor named James Earl Jones instantly made him a star.
Jim Nickerson. He's a guy whose stock and trade is to show two guys how to bang away at each other without getting hurt.
Start over. Boom, boom, boom. Move over, repeat. Right to the body, left to the body. Can't watch.
The fights seem to be always kind of the same way they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. So just trying to take the realism and put them into movie fights was the most challenging, because everything always seems so stagey, and all due respect to John Wayne, there was only one John Wayne punch and everybody tried to duplicate it, and then it wasn't working, anybody past John Wayne.
Boom, boom, boom. Now center right in right here. Let's go body block left. No, go up to the head. Boom, catch that one there, right? And then bait his last one. Boom.
Number one, it's all in the planning, is the choreography, is that how much time is allowed to prepare. Everything's in the preparation. See, my main thing is making the actors, making sure they're comfortable. Once they're all comfortable, then I can put the camera in, we can make magic. Okay, that wasn't too bad, but here's the problem. Now, the right hand, the one that he weaves, you're just throwing it over here. You gotta put it, I like to put it on his left ear, so this way he's got a reason to weave. Right now, all he's doing is he's either redirecting or bobbing right, one of the two left. It's not a true weave yet, okay? You have to give them the formula of a foundation, of basics, the mechanics of it, balance. It's like turning the volume up. I like to get after it much more. I like to pace much more. I like that go for it, let me get after you type style.
Okay, fellas, and go.
Your shoulder that way, yes. Okay.
The whole world is a film society, is much more intelligent than they used to be. You can't fool people on fights anymore. They gotta look real or they'll boo you out of the theater or turn your TV off on you.
Here's a quick sampling of some of the work of stuntmaster Jim Nickerson.
Rocky, the movie that reestablished boxing films as a box office giant, fight choreography reached its peak in one of the greatest boxing films ever shot.
Stallone was, as far as a fighter, was very raw in the beginning. How I trained Stallone is all about trial and error at the time. I was pretty young when I did this show, and we hit at a good time. Timing was right. But see, we had a boxing technical advisor, tried to teach him the mechanics of boxing, and then I just took a little bit of that and took it into my system, and the rest is history. Stallone's style, as far as boxing, was very similar to Rocky Marciano's. And anybody that doesn't know that style, it's let me take three to give you my one.
The champion is trying to get himself out of there, but he just can't do it. He is being barraged with lefts and rights to the head, to the body, to the head.
John Avildsen, Academy Award-winning director of Rocky.
The first boxing film I ever did was Rocky. The first time I ever saw a prize fight was when I got the job and went to see a fight. I looked at a lot of fight films that have been made previously, and I was struck by how silly the boxing looked. It didn't look real at all. So I said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to rehearse it a lot, and we've got to start long before the movie begins so that the guys can learn how to do this so it will look good, because if it doesn't look good, then why are we doing this? So the first day we brought Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers together into a ring. One of them said, okay, now I'll do this. And they said, no, the other guy said, no, I'll do this. And I said, wait a second. Whatever you're going to do, write it out. Sylvester, why don't you go write it out, whatever you'd like to do, 2 lefts, a right, and then we'll learn that. So the next day, he came back with 32 pages of lefts, rights, crosses, jabs, all this stuff, and that's what they learned.
I saw John every once in a while, and we were working the choreography out. Plus, when it came to shooting it, he taught me an awful lot. He I don't know if he knows it, but he turned the lights on for me in a lot of areas.
During those 4 or 5 weeks, they learned every left and right and cross and jab and could anticipate what the other guy was going to do. So we had 2 things resulted from that. 1, we were able to shoot the movie in 28 days for less than $1 million. And 2, we had a crackerjack boxing sequence because the guys had gotten so good at it.
By this point in the fight, Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers look like they've been through a war. Building momentum round after round as one man tries to hold on and another reaches for his dreams. Let's find out from Carl Weathers how he got the coveted role of Apollo Creed.
I went in, I read one afternoon late on a Friday, and I sat there and I gave my best reading, and I've told this story so many times at the beginning. But anyway, Sylvester Stallone sitting there, he's reading, and he was introduced to me as the writer. And then nobody said he's going to also star in the picture. So I finished, and I felt like, it's my one opportunity. It's like an actor who walks on the set and he's only going to be there for a day, and you're going to be there for 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Well, you have to kind of stay into it, and this guy gives everything he's got, right? I gave everything I had, and Slicer looked up at me, and I turned to the director, John Avildsen, and I said, if you get me a real actor, get me an actor, I can really do this part good. Well, Sly looked at me as he does, and probably was saying, this idiot, I'm the star of the picture, he wants a real actor. Anyway, he was very generous, and I got the part.
Watching a boxer's face change through the course of a film or the course of a fight is an important ingredient in storytelling. Michael Westmore, the man who created makeup special effects for Rocky.
One of the biggest challenges up to the Rocky film at that time in 75 was the fight sequences, because it was going to go 15 rounds. It wasn't just getting hit once and have a bruise on the eye and then have it more or less disappear a little bit. They actually had to grow and be choreographed. And I took a plane flight from here to New York, and it took me the whole plane flight to work it out, to the point where you'd say he's going to get hit under the right eye, and you're going to get a little swelling out of it. And then he's going to get hit over the left eye, and that is going to have to start growing a little bit. So when the left eye starts growing, the right eye starts getting bigger, and then the top of this eye and that eye. So you have 3, 5, 6, 7 different sizes underneath an eye and over the top of an eye. So by the end of the fight, the eyes are basically swollen shut.
I can't see nothing. Gotta open my eye. Cut me, Mick. I don't want to do it. Oh, cut me.
One of the most memorable scenes, I think, in the fight in Rocky is, of course, the cut scene. And we did it in one take. And we had the swollen eye there, we had the little blood, we had the razor and everything. And the timing had to be absolutely perfect on it. This is a little mechanism right here, which is a razor with a tube, and the blood was in it. And when we look at the picture here, we have the full piece on the eye, and this is Al Silvani, who was actually a real cut man in boxing. And Al held this in his hand, and he would just take and draw it across the eye like that, and as he would do it, he would just pull the plunger, and it would lay the blood stream right across the eyeball.
They look like they've been in a war, these two.
Stallone was that into the realism of what we were doing, that he didn't want to just fake it with makeup, which is 2-dimensional. He wanted to use a 3rd-dimensional plane to be able to work with. On the first few days of Rocky, we were traveling around in a Winnebago in Philadelphia, and we were making jokes about Rocky meets Bonzo, Rocky flies to the moon, with really no idea that the Rocky saga would continue for the period that it has, with the popularity it has, and the type of money that a film like this would bring in, because boxing films were not popular at that point. But he was able to take a boxing film and put, life into it.
This is the prime example of how far boxing films have evolved. Raging Bull, the most realistically brutal fight film ever made.
Being involved with Bobby De Niro and the Raging Bull was one of the greatest things that I was ever part of. I didn't know at the time that it was going to be as good as it was, but I was glad just to be involved. And Bobby, he was a real fighter.
Just watch and listen to these punches. Every time De Niro hits the other fighter, it seems to land with the force of a sledgehammer. One can really appreciate the opponent's skill and timing in reacting to the punches De Niro throws.
I've sparred with him, and I tell you something, I've been in with some champs, some world champions, and ain't been hit as hard as I've been hit with him.
As Jake LaMotta, he trained to the point when we shot the fight films that the fight advisors that we had around us said that he was so well trained that he could probably go into lower divisions of boxing and probably win. Working with Robert De Niro was a real pleasure. It's a question that's been asked of me by many actors because his volume of work is so big, the characters he's done, and they want to know, people want to know who is the real De Niro. And I think I can honestly say when it's all over with, I don't think anybody knows the real De Niro.
Contrast in their styles. The speedy Ray Robinson up on his toes. The dancing master. LaMotta the brawler moves in front for most of the time. Now he's hurt Robinson.
He had gotten his weight down to 152 pounds. And when we broke for lunch, he would go work out instead of eating. He was that dedicated. His body probably will never get down to that weight, into that muscle tone again the rest of his lifetime. And then it was so strange because after that, he had to go through a weight gain process. He started to eat glazed donuts and pasta and malts. He'd have a dozen glazed donuts delivered in the morning. We even built a rubber stomach for him. He outgrew the stomach before we could ever use it. He weighed 215 pounds by the time we hit New York to do the final work. It was interesting because there wasn't really so much of a personality change or anything like that. It was like something that he had to do for the character, and it was marvelous.
Scenes like this helped win Thelma Schoonmaker an Academy Award for editing. The quick cuts and tight close-ups of spraying blood and flailing arms give the fight a gritty, violent feel, unparalleled in boxing films. In Rocky IV, Stallone faced a powerful Russian boxer, played by Dolph Lundgren.
I must break you.
When I got the part, I didn't know what it had in store for me. I just, sometimes you're not really aware of that because I didn't know the business. I didn't know the exposure I was going to get. So I just looked at it as a way of paying my bills, more or less. When I started working with Stallone, I was a kid. I didn't know anything about anything in this business. And obviously, he's a top guy to learn from. Physically, he was in very good shape. I was an athlete at the time, so I was in pretty good shape myself. And before the Rocky film, I was a martial artist since I was 15. And I knew a little bit about boxing, but I had to adjust my style according to the character I was playing, the way he was fighting.
Rocky's hurt. He worked the sleeping giant, and now he's paying.
The actual fight scene was choreographed. We had a 50-page script with left, right, left hook, right cross, and so forth. So that took about 5 months to practice.
Forget technique. Forget strategy.
The fight in Rocky IV was, obviously, it's not completely choreographed. You're trying to avoid getting hit, but you don't want to make it a bloodbath out there, but you do get hit a little bit, especially to the body.
I had some injuries in Rocky IV. You know, small things. Bruises, cuts, strains, a couple of, a little bit of a headache once in a while.
Yes, well, it's over for us as well. So see you next time on Hollywood Stuntmakers, and keep safe.